Hello everyone, today I'm going to be doing a master study of this painting by John Singer Sargent. This painting is of a lady called Lady Agnew of Lochnow. It was painted in around 1892-1893. It's one of the most beloved paintings of John Singer Sargent's and most well known. I can't speak for other people, but there's something about this kind of wry expression that she has in her face. But not just that, the way that the sofa melds into her neck, which melds into her dress, is so wonderfully painted, and I probably will never be able to paint like that. But the masterful way that John Singer Sargent has painted this is just awe-inspiring, and it's amazing to see in person if you ever get that opportunity. It's actually a pretty challenging painting for me to do a drawing of because the tones are so very similar. So yeah, keep watching to see how I get on. So I'm starting off with a really organic, rough approach. I found this quite helpful when I have a drawing where there's a certain expression that's slightly exaggerated. And by exaggerating it in my initial sketch, I will then, when I go over with the detail, I'll wind it in a bit, but it will still somehow retain some of that original expression. So I usually find myself taking this approach with a drawing like this. Maybe it's just me, but if I take a very rigid approach where I'm kind of blocking in and measuring everything precisely, it somehow loses a bit of that essence and personality as the process goes on. So this is the way that I work it. So yes, I've started off with a very rough sketch using the side of my pencil, and then I'm just going in a little bit with the tip of my pencil and just refining things a little bit. So I would say that although the face is pretty accurate, I've made some fairly major errors with the way I've drawn her shoulder, which I'll find later on when I do the comparison against the original photo. I think for me, knowing that I have the app that allows me to overlay the original painting gives me this feeling of safety and comfort that if I make any errors now, I can just fix them, and that allows me to be really free with the way I draw. So at the moment I'm just really enjoying the process of trying to map that undefinable expression she has on her face in a quick drawing. So for once I'm actually drawing her eyes. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that eyes are something that I tend to leave till the very last possible second that I have to draw them. But for this drawing, her eyes are so important to the expression in her face. The way that her eyes always slant downwards on the sides and they're quite hooded and lazy. I just wanted to try and capture as best I could, because the way I felt was that if I didn't get them right, then it wouldn't be this lady by the time I finished the drawing. So for once I just pushed through the pain zone and just decided that I wanted to get those eyes down early doors. I'm actually doing this a lot quicker than I normally would. Normally I'd take a lot more time to get that initial drawing correct. It's an opportunity for you to practice your accuracy, so I don't like to cheat myself of the practice. But this is for a video, I don't want to bore you guys, so I did actually race through this portion pretty quickly and skipped over to the overlay section. So here I'm using Overlay Cutout Editor. It's an iPhone app. I will post an alternative Android app in the comments if you'd like to use one of those and you don't have an iPhone. Although warning, I've not used those before. So as you can see from this overlay, I was pretty accurate on the face, but on the body, a few little issues. I got her neck in the wrong position, which is a real problem for me and something I would normally spend some time checking in on to make sure I got it correct. I've also got her her right arm, the one on the left hand side, way off. So having this check in just kind of gives me a sense check that that's not quite right and something I need to fix. So just quickly popping back to the drawing, I'm just going to go ahead and fix some of the issues that I saw when I did the overlay. There's not a lot, there's a few around her eyes, so I did the eyes a little bit too large. As I mentioned, I got the neck a little bit wrong and her my arm is very wrong. So as long as I fix those elements now, then they won't be a problem for me later on in the process. I've fixed most of the major issues. Now, it's still not quite right. I've not really got her expression quite right, but it's close enough that I'm happy. What you'll see me doing now is I'm coming in with a slightly heavier hand on some of the major landmarks. That is because I'm going to do something in a minute which is a lot of fun. You'll get to see. So yeah, I'm going to do something in a minute, which means that I need to make sure that those landmarks are pretty nailed down and dark for the next stage. I was pretty happy with the drawing. I'd done the last few adjustments and it was time to bring in my beauty blender. So this I purchased from a beauty store. I think it was Superdrug here in the UK. But it's a makeup blender. It cost about £1, which is about like $1 or $2. So you can find one of these in any good pharmacy or beauty shop. It's just a sponge basically, and what I'm doing is I'm running over my drawing and I'm just smudging the heck out of it, so it's all just a very muted tone. You'll see why in a little minute, but this is the approach I really love to use when I'm drawing someone that is very pale skinned or has a very uniform or young complexion. The reason for that is it's for those kind of people, it's all about the highlights. So we really need a darker background to key those highlights off of, and you'll see that in a second. Now I'm coming with my eraser. So I'm using my Tombow eraser. This is almost like a pen, a retractable pen, which is a razor instead. I did use a Stanley knife to cut a sharp edge. Don't do this at home. Use a proper cutting board. It's only because my knife is very, very blunt that I even bothered to do it this way. But as you can see, something about coming in with that eraser and picking out the highlights immediately gives you a drawing that pops, and it gives you an idea of that face as a form, even though it is so pale. So I really love doing that as a way of just keying in what a person's expression and face looks like. So now I'm coming back in with my pencil and I'm just gently building up some of the tones. It is very difficult because you want to keep it quite muted here. There's actually not a lot of variety in the tones in her face, so it would be very easy to go overboard here. So do use your beauty blender or your stump to bring in some more blended tones if you like. Just be aware that if you use your stump stick too much, it can give a very smudgy, odd expression. So it's very important to balance those marks out with some hatching as well. But it's one of those things that you get a hang of over time, so just whatever works for you in the moment, and just keep working at it. Know that you can always use your kneaded eraser to lift off some of that tone if you're not completely happy with it. So you can see, contrary to some of my usual approaches, I'm spending some time getting the impression of her expression correct. I wish I had a good reason to tell you why I did that. I think it's because I just wanted to nail down her expression, because I felt that once I got that right, the rest would just flow. But yeah, I mean, whatever works, the way you're feeling on the day, just go with it. I think we all love to know that there's a magic formula, that if you follow this magic formula, your drawings will always be amazing. I think the honest answer is that formula doesn't exist. And if you lock yourself into a certain approach, then you're just depriving yourself of a whole lot of excitement and interest and experimentation. So honestly, I just went with the flow and just did the drawing the way it felt to me in that moment in time, the way that the painting was talking to me about how it wanted to be drawn. If that doesn't sound incredibly pretentious. But yeah, so yeah, I wish I could just tell you this is the steps A, B and C you should follow, and demonstrate that consistently, but you know what, sometimes you just got to play and have fun. So here I'm just drawing a bit of the background. It really is quite dark behind her head and behind the sofa. You can see the way the hair on our left hand side, her right, is almost blending into that background. And there's a real mixture around the edge of her hair of hard and soft edges. So I really want to bring up the darkness of the background so I can replicate that in my drawing. So you can see here I'm really noodling on those eyes. This is a problem when I draw eyes early. Yeah, I think sometimes you've just got to keep going and making minute changes, and eventually you get to a place where you're happy, and then you just need to stop and move on. I also had a problem with her mouth. I think in my initial drawing I just upturned it very slightly so she was looking more happy than wry. The difference between the two is minuscule. It's fractions of a millimetre, especially when you're drawing this small. So don't beat yourself up if it doesn't look right the way you're drawing it. You can just move on, or you can just keep trying and tweaking that expression until you get the one you want. But it really is kind of level 10 of the difficulty scale, so don't feel bad if you're not quite there yet. I think the major exercise is trying to identify the main tones and replicate those and the correct shapes as much as you can. I really struggled after I got started with that gauzy dress that she had, the gauzy top of her dress. It's almost the exact same tone as the skin underneath it, and I don't know if that's just me being a bit tone blind because I don't always get it, and actually it's a different tone, but to me that looks almost exactly the same tone. So if you don't have colour to indicate a difference between one thing and the next, it's really tricky to know how to handle it in graphite. So yeah, this was a real challenge for me. I'm not even sure I pulled it off, but the top was definitely understated. I just kept coming in with the blender and just trying to smudge it out a lot so I can get some of that softness. So yeah, it's tough. I don't know why I chose this picture. Well, I know why I chose this picture because it's amazing, but it's also a real challenge to do in graphite. So yeah, lots of fun. So one thing I would say is I'm not being completely slavish to the folds of fabric that I see. So if I see like the way that her ribbon is curling round, or the way that the top is falling against the darker purple of her underdress, I'm not trying to replicate the position and tone of that fold exactly. It's a bit like I do for hair, where I want to just kind of try and get a feel for the general shape and soul of whatever it is I'm painting. So that's just to explain why you might see some differences in the way I've drawn and painted fabric in my drawing. So you can probably see I'm using my finger to smudge. If you're doing this to sell, or you want it to be archival, please don't do this because you've got oils in your fingers. You can just use that little bit of tissue paper or cloth to do the wiping, or your beauty blender. So that's it. Public services announcement is finished. So what fascinates me with these paintings is how much you can leave out. Like, for example, her necklace. Like, would we even know where the side of her neck was if Sargent hadn't gently painted in the edge of her necklace where it cuts across her collarbones? So I just love the little details like that, which are just the perfect amount of minimal statement that tells you what you need to know. And actually, the more we can make the viewer guess and imagine what the answer is to a drawing or painting, the better the overall experience is. So I flipped my drawing through upside down. If you can try and do this at least once in your drawing process. You can see it now that it completely resets your brain as to what you're looking at and where the differences are. I find it's immensely helpful for identifying errors in my drawing, but not just my drawing, but in the tones that I've laid down. You can see that I've massively understated the tones around her waist and under her armpit, and even if you didn't see that before with the drawing the right way up, as soon as you flip it through 180, it's like your brain resets and it sees everything in a whole new light, and those obvious errors become obvious again. So yeah, I think that's a really helpful tactic to do. I mean, obviously we can't always tell a model to turn upside down, but if you're drawing from a photo reference, then you should absolutely take the opportunity to turn your drawing upside down or sideways along with the photo reference so you can see it in whole new eyes. So back to the right way around. I think at this stage I was pretty happy with the way it looked. Again, in turning it round, you kind of see some of the obvious errors. You can see I'm darkening up some of those areas I talked about before under her arm and trying to bring a bit more definition around her hand. But overall I was pretty happy with the way the drawing was looking. I don't think I've got her expression. I think in my drawing she looks a bit more sedate and happy rather than wry, but it's still a cool drawing and I'm pretty happy with the fact it still looks like the same person, if a different expression on her face. So yeah, this has been a fun exercise. It took me about 1.5 hours to draw in total, and yeah, I think what I got done in the time was pretty good. I did actually come back and tweak a few things after the fact, but for the most part I was pretty happy. So just some last tidying up with a kneaded eraser and making a note of the name of the painting. Not that I would forget because it is so famous, but yeah, it's good to track how you get on. And this is a finished drawing. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Do comment in the comments if you've got any suggestions, like and subscribe for always if you'd like to watch more videos like this. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.